Today, we're facing pretty high inflation, which means it is increasingly more difficult for you as a consumer to purchase the goods and services that you need to in your day-to-day life. Unfortunately, there is a great deal of misunderstanding around inflation, which can mostly be laid at the feet of libertarians. One of the ways of measuring inflation is by using the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. What it does is it takes what economists call a basket of commodities and looks at their pricing over a specific period of time. In the case of the CPI, a month. It includes the prices of food, apparel, automobiles, among other categories. The Federal Reserve has its own measure, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index. It works pretty much the same, but it uses a different basket of commodities. Right now, we're facing a high inflation. As of June earlier this year, it was 9.1%, the highest it's been in 4 decades. So, the question is, why are we facing such a high rate of inflation right now? Basically, it's Justin Trudeau's fault because he's the Prime Minister and a secret communist. Him and his inflationary policies, of which I cannot name a single one. I came to this conclusion because I was eating paint chips. In actuality, inflation is far more complicated than simply thinking that there's some kind of secret communist in the government currently engaged in a plot to rob you of your money. The actual inflation that exists right now has 3 primary factors. There has been an increase in household demand created by the return to work after the COVID lockdowns and a corresponding supply chain shortage. Secondly, the war in Ukraine is playing havoc on multiple markets. And finally, the presence of a strong labor market. When the COVID lockdown began, people started buying less due to restricted incomes and finding out who the real essential workers are. Much of our daily production was restricted, even halted as well, shrinking the existing supply. Now that those restrictions have been eased and people have returned to work, the demand now exceeds the current supply of commodities. By the so-called laws of the market, the price of goods and services will increase, reaching a new balancing point. This, of course, will change once production catches up with demand. Shelter, food, and energy are major players in the CPI. They make up about 54% of the entire index, so changes in their price have a large effect. The other major factor to our current inflation is the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Since the Russian invasion of the country, there have been numerous sanctions placed on Russia. These limit their ability to export oil, which means there has been a shrinking of the supply of gasoline. It seems the other oil producers aren't too keen on producing more to lower the price. After all, they're making an above-average profit as a result. This has a tremendous impact on commodity production as well. Nothing escapes being affected by the gasoline price. Every commodity has to be transported at some point. Any increase in the cost of transportation is going to increase the cost of production as well. Finally, as COVID restrictions have been lifted, companies have reversed the trend of laying off people. This means that there's a great increase in demand for labor. This has led to increased wages and industries competing for labor. This has also allowed disgruntled labor to seek employment elsewhere, leading to what a lot of economists call churn. The current inflation that we're feeling right now is mostly attributable to COVID and its lasting effects, as well as the corresponding market mechanisms. This is quite far from the idea that somehow this is part of a large conspiracy, as some people have liked to frame it. In the near future, the most likely change that's going to take place is governments making demands on the oil industry to lower their prices by increasing production. As many of these countries reach election season, depending on what country they're in, they're going to want lower gas prices in order to look better going into that election. So that's probably the most likely thing that's going to happen. It's a question of whether or not these companies are actually going to increase the actual supply increase the actual supply according to the existing demand. That is a question that still remains to be seen. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.